Most people don't walk away from a high-paying corporate job unless they've been preparing for that for their entire lives. Betsy Cohen did, guided by a message that her single mother taught her early on. You are the CEO of you. I just love that. Today she shows us how intentional planning can create freedom. Welcome to Her Next Chapter, the weekly podcast dedicated to helping women prepare for, move through, and thrive during transitions. Today's conversation is one that you don't want to miss, especially if you're imagining your next chapter of work or your financial life. My guest is Betsy Cohen, a philanthropic futurist with future good. She brings decades of experience across corporate leadership, government, and nonprofit work, holds an MBA from Harvard, and has received numerous awards for her civic and community leadership. She also serves on several advisory boards and helps clients plan for the future through the lens of philanthropy, purpose, and thoughtful financial stewardship. Betsy, welcome to Her Next Chapter. I'm so grateful to have you here and can't wait for this conversation.
Thanks.
Before we dive in, I'd like to give listeners a little sense of what you do as a philanthropic futurist. What is that and what drew you to this space?
Well, being a philanthropic futurist brings together many of the skills that I have learned in my past, from financial planning to nonprofit stewardship, and how do you get money from where money resides to where nonprofits and causes need the money. And so that's part of the value that I feel that I can bring as a philanthropic futurist as we look at the future, long-term, and what our society needs.
Well, and I think even people that have those excess funds or those discretionary funds, don't even know where to go and what to do with that extra money if they do want to pursue philanthropy.
Yeah, philanthropic futurist is a lot to say.
It is.
But I do think, many of us want to support causes that are near and dear to us, maybe in our communities or globally. A lot of younger people, particularly now, are looking at issues about the environment and global issues. So it can be from causes that are important on a societal, global basis to something that could be close to you, a friend in need, a school, a religious affiliation, all the things that we care about and we want to do something to make our community and the world a bit better and find a way, which could be small, or it could be in a much grander way if we have the resources to give more support.
Sure. So reaching out to Future Good and contacting you could help someone walk through that process and figure out a good strategy for that giving.
So we do. Future Good is a consultancy, and we are hired to speak with associations and conferences and individuals to talk about the future of philanthropy. Where is it going and how can you make a difference? And then we are also hired by foundations and nonprofits to think about their long-term future and how do they build a long-term vision that their organization can rally behind, and also to have the kind of vision that funders are going to want to support.
Sure.
Because when you see an important vision that looks to the future, that gives you confidence that if you put your trust in your money, it's going to go towards something that you can envision.
Right.
And we help organizations get there.
Great. I love that. Let's talk about how you transitioned into this industry, if you will. You used to work in corporate and government nonprofits. What is it that motivated you to make that transition? And then let's talk about how you were prepared for that.
I had a long corporate career, and being in the business world gives you many skills, both from a operational point of view, organizational point of view, and the business world in general pays a lot better than the social segments, government. And so when I advise graduates, for example, who are looking in different pathways, I say, go the business route first, because you get training, you get organizations that can often invest in you in a way that a nonprofit can't, and your salary and your benefits, potentially bonuses or incentives, can give you more financial resources. And so for me, I started down that path and had a long career that allowed me to build up resources and skills and training that was very important. And so that was really the base of my first career.
Okay. And then what prompted you to make that move, and how did you have support to do that transition?
So there comes a time in every career where it becomes apparent that it's time to move on. And sometimes, you sense it as an individual, and sometimes the organization, it kind of encourages you. And after having been a corporate executive for a long time, there was a time in that corporate experience where a number of us that had been there a long time, we could sense that they were looking to elevate the next group of leaders, and that they were going to help us move out. And so it was kind of a two-way street where it was apparent that it was time to move on. And some of the people who left corporate at that time chose to retire, but I was young enough that I knew that I had other things I wanted to accomplish, and that I had put money away and built my financial base so that I could look at doing things that didn't pay what my corporate world had paid. And so I was looking to make an impact in our region in terms of government or nonprofit, civic leadership. And I met with a lot of people to see where I could bring my skills. And in that case, it was apparent that there was an opportunity for me to join a public-private partnership that was a nonprofit within government that was very exciting, where I could help make a difference in the region, but it paid significantly less than what I had paid before. Yeah. But that was not my motivation in that second career.
Right. What do you think helped you? How did you know to prepare from a financial perspective for this potential change? Because so often these changes either happen to us, or, as you said, we just kind of feel that it's time to move on, but maybe hadn't financially prepared. Because especially during that first career, you're upgrading your house, your car, your family is expanding, you're wanting to travel. And so that focus of actually saving money sometimes falls to the bottom of the line.
Yeah, there are many demands, when you're in those younger corporate years, working years with family demands. But for me, my husband and I had the good fortune to attend a financial planning workshop, I guess, when we were about 30. And it was kind of a shock, because as we listened to the person that was educating the whole group of us about finances, the person was sharing what it would take down the road, the amount of money you'd need to put away to have an income that would support you in retirement, which seemed forever long in the future. Right. But they gave us a formula with some math to say, what would you need with the current income you have, your expenses, and with inflation, and then with changes in the environment, how much money would you need to put away and invest so that you would have that money in the bank? And when you put money away early, it will compound and it will grow, even though it's very hard to do because we at that point had 2 young boys. But they kind of laid out a number that looked like astronomical to us, but it was a shock. But it woke us up to the fact that we needed to pay ourselves first and start putting money away at that point in time. And so that was a wake-up call that made us start putting savings as a priority.
Okay. Wow. And do you feel like you had that role model from your parents? I know you and your husband both sadly lost your fathers at young ages. Did your mother influence that discipline as well, or where did that also come from?
For me, my mother went back to work after my dad died. She went and got an MBA. But money was always, not tight, but it was important because I think she didn't have a big reservoir saved. And so we were always very conscious of money. And my husband, similarly, his mom had been widowed and she had 4 sons. And so financial stability resonated. And as I watched my mom manage having 3 kids and being on her own. And so it wasn't that she had a big savings plan, and it wasn't particularly that she was philanthropic. I just saw how she really had to manage hard. It was also true that when she was working, the company she worked for did not have a pension or retirement plan. And different times in my corporate life when I considered leaving, she would say to me, Betsy, you have a very good plan there, finances, and there are benefits, and really think hard. And she gave me kind of serious views of leaving for things that might have had a higher risk, higher return, but she pushed me into some things that were about safety.
Wow. I love that. I mean, learning from the prior generation, either what works or what doesn't work, really does influence our choices moving forward. She had a favorite phrase that she taught you. What was that?
She would say, "You are the CEO of you." And that became really a watchword for me, because I saw her being the CEO of our family, but saying to me that I had to be the CEO of me, because, in the real world, my dad was 38 when he died, and I saw what can happen with death and people who get divorced, or they have a spouse or partner who loses a job, and it puts a lot of responsibility on all the adults or the only adult in the family. And I also really talk strong words when I talk to young women who talk about wanting to be full-time mothers and leaving the workforce. And again, it can be a good option. And again, if you have financial background and resources, and if you and your family know that you have plenty of money, but if you don't have a huge backdrop of money, it's a big risk when women leave the workforce. And so I say, you may end up being the CEO of you, and things happen in life. So maybe there's a way you can work part-time. Maybe you start a business on the side that's small, but if you need to keep up your skills, so if you stay out of the workforce for 5 years or 10 years, the technology changes.
Oh, yeah. It's unbelievable.
How do you think about operating an organization? And so you could leave yourself in a really difficult position if life unfolds in a way that you're not planning for. So I encourage them to, not just walk away from all the things in the work world, but find ways that they can stay relevant. If not, the other part I say is, yes, sometimes women will tell me that, well, my salary hardly covers the childcare costs. And I'm like, well, yes, but it keeps you in the game for the long term. And or it's not just your money, but it might be your spouse or partner's money. You have to look at it as a family investment in childcare, because when the kids go to school, then you are then going to be able to earn money, and you have a long life ahead of you to prepare for. So don't just look at it as a short-term issue.
Yeah. I love how important preparation has always been for you, because I think it gives you financial freedom and it gives you options. And, for you, pursuing that philanthropic pursuit, is part of filling up your soul, if you will. And you've had that planning in place, so you've got that financial freedom now. Are you in a new beginning, or are you kind of in the messy middle still as you've made this third career transition?
I think I'm moving from the messy middle to the new normal after a year. It's been exactly a year that I've been in my third career. So it's taken a while in this year of reintroduction of myself as a philanthropic futurist, and for people to understand this new company, Future Good, that I work with. And so it's been kind of a rebranding and a restarting. And now I'm starting to hit my stride in year two. But it's a process as you move through those stages, Karen, as you mentioned.
And you feel like you're just starting all over again in a new industry. But I think that it kind of renews something in you, and it keeps you challenged, and it keeps you ongoing, keeps you relevant.
Well, that's part of who I am. I'm a visionary person. I'm someone who likes to have new goals. I like to be a continual learner, a lifelong learner. And so for me, that is exciting. And after I had been doing my other role for 12 years, I just had a sense that it was time to turn it over to someone else. And I was ready to stretch myself in a new way. And that was really what it was about.
That's so inspiring. Do you have certain books or resources that were helpful for you that maybe some of our listeners might want to pick up?
Well, financially, I like Morgan Housel. I've always been a fan of Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger. And then just a lot of books about personal reinvention and the things that I have learned as a mentor to other women and men, and also for the people who've mentored me to have ways that you read about reinvention. And I think often there's also that feeling of how you can get into the sense of forming, forming, and norming. And I think when you are in the beginning of how do you reinvent or do something, it's the storming stage. And it's uncomfortable because you have to go through a lot of new motions. So you're storming, and then finally you start forming, and then you become norming.
I love that.
And that storming forming, norming as kind of a model. And when I went through it 2 years ago to be storming about my next future, it's also something that I encourage other people that I mentor to know that it's these different stages that we go through as you leave something and then move into something new.
Well, and to find that that's normal. It's
Correct.
normal to be in that storming stage and to be disruptive and kind of relook at everything from a new lens, I think is important.
And you have to say goodbye to the old things that you had before, because it could be, that you had different kinds of colleagues or a different work environment or different financial parameters. So you have to say goodbye to those old things so that you can then move into the new.
Right. And that with that comes new habits and new routines.
Yes.
And sometimes it's difficult to start those things up again, but it all pays off, right? Once you get through it. Well, Betsy, thank you so much for joining us and for sharing how grounded and empowering you are. It's a great perspective on transition and planning. And I just love how financially prepared you were from such an early age and had that vision of what things were going to look like in the future for you.
Well, thank you. I think it's part of having an abundant life. And I think if you have abundance in your family and your friends and your community, and abundance of financial resources, you can lead an abundant life.
I love it. Well, thank you again. And for everyone listening, if you like this podcast, please subscribe and please feel free to share it as well. This is Karen Maurer with her next chapter, and we'll see you next week.